The ocean hides more secrets than we could ever imagine. Among them are ships that should not exist anymore, vessels that have no crew, no destination, and yet continue to drift across the endless waters. They call them ghost ships, silent, cursed, and often avoided by sailors who swear they've seen pale figures walking the decks at night. Point one of these ships has become a legend. Rusted and broken, its name long scraped off the hull, it drifts in the fog like a tomb. No official record can explain what happened to the crew. No survivors ever came back to tell the story. Yet those who dared to climb aboard never returned unchanged. Some disappeared completely. Others came back whispering about voices in the walls, shadows in the water, and footsteps echoing across empty corridors. For decades, the ship has been a warning, a floating graveyard. But explorers, divers, and thrill seekers can't resist its call. They want to see if the stories are true, to touch the decaying metal, to walk where the vanished crew once stood, to prove that there is nothing beyond the rust and salt. But every time someone sets foot on that deck, the same pattern repeats: fear, silence, and unanswered questions. Evidence of something watching, waiting, hiding between the waves. Tonight, you will hear three true, scary stories. Accounts from those who dared to board this ghost ship. Stories of a captain's diary that ends with three terrifying words. Of shadows lurking deep beneath the surface, pulling divers into the abyss. And of a final desperate signal. A voice calling from the past that refuses to fade. These are not myths. These are testimonies, fragments of truth left behind by people who went too far. And now, they belong to you. So, if you think you can handle the truth, stay with me until the end. Because once you hear these stories, you'll never look at the ocean the same way again. Story 1. The captain's diary when the salvage crew first spotted the ship drifting in the fog. They thought it was just another abandoned freighter. Rust covered the hull like dried blood. The ropes hung in tatters, and the deck groaned with every wave. But from the moment their boots touched the steel surface, an unnatural silence settled around them. No gulls circled overhead. No rats scurried in the corners. Even the usual slap of the ocean against metal seemed muted, swallowed by the fog. One of the men whispered later that it felt like stepping into a coffin that had already been nailed shut. Inside the captain's quarters, they found something that explained, at least partly, what might have happened. On the desk, half buried under a crust of dust and salt, lay a leather-bound journal. The cover was cracked, stiff with age, and the pages inside had yellowed. Yet the writing was still there, each line more frantic than the last. The earliest entries were normal. The captain described supply checks, daily routines, and minor disputes among the crew. But then the tone shifted. One entry read, "We saw lights in the water last night. Not the glow of another vessel, not phosphorescent plankton. These lights moved with intent, circling us, blinking in patterns." Some of the men swore they could hear voices beneath the waves, rising and falling like chants. I told them it was their imagination. But deep down, I'm not so sure. The following pages detailed storms that came out of nowhere, squalls that battered the ship while the sky above remained clear. Compass needles spun in circles. Radios hissed with static. And the crew began to change. Hargreaves refuses to sleep. He says he hears someone knocking on the hull from outside, as if another ship is pressed against ours. But we are alone out here. Last night, he tried to climb overboard, claiming someone was calling his name from the water. We had to restrain him. Another entry. The cook disappeared this morning. No one saw him leave his bunk. No splash in the sea. He's simply gone. We searched every corner of this ship, but it's as though he was erased. The men whisper that the lights took him. I can't quiet them anymore. By the final pages, the handwriting was almost illegible, scrawled across the margins, ink blotted as though the captain had been writing in a panic. His words made little sense, half sentences, rambling fragments, until the very last entry. They are on board. They walk the corridors when the lamps burn low. They whisper through the pipes. I hear them behind the walls, inside the walls. I cannot leave. None of us can leave. The ocean wants us back. The journal ended with 3 chilling words, written so hard the pen tore through the paper. Don't look outside. The salvage crew closed the diary, unsettled but not yet afraid. They were hardened men, after all, accustomed to wrecks and disasters. But when they left the captain's quarters, they noticed something strange. Every porthole on the ship had been painted black from the inside. Thick, uneven layers of paint, as though someone had desperately tried to block the view of the sea. That night, anchored beside the derelict, the salvage crew heard noises from the empty vessel. Slow, dragging footsteps echoing across the deck. The creak of doors opening and closing. And, faintest of all, the sound of knuckles tapping against the hull, coming from beneath the waves. When morning came, they boarded again to finish their inspection. The captain's diary was gone. In its place lay a single page, smeared with salt and rust, bearing only the same words scratched deep into the paper. Don't look outside. The salvage team brought the ship back toward port, but halfway through the tow, the derelict slipped free. Chains snapped, as if cut from the inside, and the vessel drifted back into the fog, vanishing from sight. To this day, no one knows where it went. But sailors claim that on calm nights, when the sea is too quiet and the fog too thick, you can hear the faint tapping of knuckles against the hull of your own ship, followed by a voice whispering from the dark, "Look outside." Story 2. Shadows in the hold. The legend of the ghost ship spread quickly after the salvage crew returned. Most dismissed it as superstition, a sailor's tale meant to scare rookies. But not everyone. A year later, a group of 3 freelance divers, young, ambitious, and hungry for fame, decided to seek out the drifting vessel. They weren't there for salvage or treasure. They wanted proof. If they could capture real footage of the ship's interior, of its infamous hauntings, they'd become legends themselves. They found the vessel floating 30 miles off the coast, caught in a patch of unnatural stillness. The sea was calm, unnaturally calm, as though the waves refused to touch the hull. No seabirds followed them. No fish swam below. Just silence. The divers geared up and boarded, cameras strapped to their helmets. They laughed nervously as they moved through the deck, whispering commentary for their future audience. The ship was exactly as the stories described: rusted corridors, cabins frozen in time, doors that creaked open as if expecting them. It wasn't until they descended into the lower hold that things began to change. The air grew heavy. Their voices echoed strangely. as though the walls were swallowing the sound. A foul smell lingered, damp and metallic, like seawater mixed with old blood. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, landing on rows of rusted containers. Some had been pried open long ago, their contents scattered. Others remained sealed, streaked with salt and age. Perfect. One of them whispered into the camera, "This is where the fun begins." But fun was the last word anyone would later associate with what they recorded as they pushed deeper into the hold. Their lights began to flicker. At first, they blamed faulty batteries. Then came the shapes, shadows that moved across the walls, stretching unnaturally long, even though there was nothing to cast them. One diver stopped suddenly. His camera tilted toward a corner where the darkness seemed thicker, alive. "Did you hear that?" he asked. The playback later revealed the sound he'd noticed. Whispers, low and distorted, layered over each other as if dozens of voices were speaking at once. None of the divers recognized the language, but the cadence was unmistakably human. They pressed on, nerves fraying. The shadows grew bolder. Once, a handprint appeared on the fogged lens of a helmet camera on the inside. The diver tore off his mask, gasping, swearing it felt like someone's icy palm had brushed against his face. The final footage from their cameras was chaotic, lights whipping back and forth, screams echoing as something unseen moved between the containers, rushing just beyond their beams. At one point, one of the divers shouts, "It's behind us." But nothing shows on the video, only the elongated silhouettes slithering across the walls, mimicking their every movement. The last moments are the most disturbing. One camera, dropped to the floor, keeps recording as its owner is dragged backward into the dark. His nails scrape against the rust, leaving bloody trails. His screams echo, cut off suddenly, as if swallowed whole. The two remaining divers bolted for the ladder. One made it. The other didn't. The survivor surfaced hours later, clinging to a buoy, barely conscious. He was rescued by a passing trawler, but he never spoke again. His hair had gone stark white, and his hands shook so violently he couldn't hold a pen to write. Investigators recovered one of the cameras. The footage was leaked online, dismissed by most as a hoax. But those who watched carefully noticed something chilling. In the final seconds, when the camera lay abandoned on the floor, the shadows stopped mimicking the divers. They stood still, watching, waiting. And just before the video cut to static, a new shadow appeared on the wall, taller, broader, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. The survivor, the one who escaped, still sits in a psychiatric ward. Doctors call it trauma-induced silence. But at night, when they check his room, they sometimes find the words scratched into the wall with trembling hands. They follow the light. Story 3. The last signal months had passed since the diver incident. The ghost ship was now infamous, a name whispered in marinas, on forums, and by fishermen who swore they had glimpsed it drifting silently at night. Some said it was cursed. Others claimed it was simply a myth. But a small team of paranormal investigators wasn't there for rumors. They were there for proof. Armed with radios, EMF detectors, and night vision cameras, they boarded the vessel as dusk fell, the sky churning with fog and shadows. The ocean was unnaturally still, and the ship seemed almost alive, floating with a grace that defied its rusted frame. The first few hours passed with relative calm. They checked each cabin, scanned the corridors, and recorded ambient sounds. Everything was as expected. Silence, the occasional groan of metal, the subtle slap of waves against the hull. Then, at precisely midnight, the old radio crackled to life. AT first. It was static, nothing unusual. But soon, a voice emerged through the hiss, faint and distorted. The investigators exchanged nervous glances. It wasn't a recording of the usual chatter. This voice was pleading, shouting, panicked. SOS. SOS. Trapped help. Can't leave. They are here. The words repeated over and over. Every attempt to turn the radio off failed. The static hummed, then warped into the sound of pounding footsteps on the deck, echoing through the corridors. The investigators followed the sound, cameras rolling, hearts hammering. The first door they opened led to an empty cabin, the floor scuffed, the bed unmade. Then came a whisper, low, almost a breath, calling one of their names. Do not leave the light. Panicked, they split up to investigate. One investigator moved toward the radio room. The lights flickered, the monitors glitched, and suddenly, the EMF detector screamed in a continuous wail. The other two turned back and saw a figure, a silhouette taller than a man, standing perfectly still at the end of the corridor. Its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, unmoving, staring. The team tried to retreat to the ladder, but the staircase leading up seemed longer than before. Every step felt heavier, and the shadows stretched unnaturally, curling around them like fingers. One of the investigators slipped, falling backward into the corridor. The figure moved silently, gliding across the deck, and vanished just as someone reached out. They regrouped on the main deck, shivering and pale. The radio began transmitting again, louder this time, the voice now clear. They are coming for the living. Do not leave. A cold wind whipped across the deck, despite the calm sea. Fog rolled in thick and fast, engulfing the ship. The investigators ran to the bow, hoping to signal a nearby vessel, but the world around them had changed. The ocean was a black mirror, reflecting nothing. Even the stars above were swallowed by darkness. And then they saw it, the ship moving on its own, not with the current, but as if something deep beneath the waves was guiding it. The hull groaned, chains rattled, and one by one, the investigators felt an invisible pull, a tug at their very being. Fear made them stumble. Some dropped cameras and equipment, which were swept into the foggy night by an unseen force. The last signal recorded on one of the cameras was not human. A voice, distorted, overlapping hundreds of whispers, screaming, "Join us! Join us! Don't fight! The ocean calls." The feed cut to static. When the rescue team arrived hours later, the investigators were gone. Only the equipment remained, scattered across the deck, still recording, capturing the faint sound of footsteps and whispers echoing across an empty ship. Mariners now report strange signals at sea, radios that turn on by themselves. SOS calls from vessels that haven't existed in decades, and sometimes the faint outline of a ship appearing in the fog, only to vanish when approached. Those who have seen it say the same thing. The ghost ship is still out there, searching, calling, waiting for the next living soul to answer its signal. And when the fog rolls in thick, Some swear they can hear it even from shore. Do not leave the light. Asterisk the ghost ship drifts silently, carrying the echoes of those who vanished aboard its rusted decks. Diaries that speak of fear, shadows that lurk beneath the waves, and voices that call out from decades past. These are not stories made up to scare sailors. They are fragments of truth, glimpses into something that still waits in the fog. The ocean is vast, and the ship moves where it pleases. Those who encounter it rarely speak of what they saw. But if you've listened closely, if you've followed every creaking step, every whisper, every frantic scream we've shared tonight, you know that something aboard that vessel still reaches for the living.so. What do you think? Could you brave the deck of the ghost ship? Would you answer the call if it reached you through the fog? Or would you heed the warning, stay in the safety of the shore, and never look outside? If you want more chilling tales of the unexplained, real encounters with the supernatural, and stories that will make you question what lies beneath the surface, make sure to subscribe. Hit the like button if these stories gave you chills, and leave a comment sharing which part of the ship terrified you the most. Your next step into the unknown begins here. Don't look away. Don't ignore the whispers. And always, keep your light on.